Hey everyone, it's me, Shika. I'm back. While I've been away, I've been doing some really good things, furthering my education and getting some classwork done and all that good stuff. But the exciting news is last week I spent all last week at Liberty University. Now, Liberty University is the biggest Christian school in the United States. And I was there to do clinical work. And while I was there doing the clinical work, I learned a lot. We did some pseudo clients where we sat down with people and actually, discussing the things that was going on with their lives. And the thing about it is that these people had to come with real issues or real things that they're struggling with. So therefore, the experience was more realistic as opposed to something that was made up. Mine, the person who had to counsel me, I'm sure that they had a time with me because just like everybody else, I had some things that I had going on up here and I wanted to put them on somebody's shoulder other than my own to be able to, it's like I wanted them to make up my mind for me. All right. But one thing that I did learn last week through the experience is that, unlike the military, as military leaders, we're more or less problem solvers. As a counselor, you're not a problem solver. You're there to actually validate a person's feelings. So say, for example, someone come to me and says, I'm having this issue with my, can't pay my bills, for example. In the military, I'm more or less, I've grew up to realize that, someone come to you like this, we have to figure out a way to solve the problem. Okay, let's figure out where you're spending your money at. Let's figure out, how much money you're spending. Let's figure out if you can get another job, whatever. We're problem solvers. Being a counselor is a 180 from being a soldier when you counsel people. A complete 180. When I tell you a 180, and I struggle with that. But luckily, it was something that I recognized early because, because of the laws and everything, and because people like to sue and stuff like that, as a counselor, you can't help a person. You can't have a person solve their problems from what you give as input. You have to allow them to work it out in their heads and maybe validate their feelings that they're experiencing. If they're feeling a certain way, they're feeling depressed, they're feeling this, they're feeling overwhelmed. Your job as a counselor is more or less to say, you know what, I understand you're feeling that way, and feeling that way can sometimes be frustrating. So those were the things that I learned last week that now I have to actually change my way of thinking. Okay. So that was that, but I had an awesome experience and I have to do that 2 more times and I very much look forward to it. So last time we discussed, PCS and how do you adjust from being a civilian to a soldier. Now, one thing about this forum is that I did not want to go from 0 to 100. Like, I didn't want to talk about transitioning from a civilian to a soldier and then all of a sudden jump into, marital issues and the impact the military has on marital issues or soldiers that suffer from PTSD. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to kind of like gradually go from like 0 degrees to 10 degrees to 20 degrees. And when I think of 100 degrees, I think of things like PTSD and the divorce rate in the military and things like that. And, those are the things I think about when I do it, when I think of 100 degrees. So by this being the third question, I'm like, okay, well, where would I be at 30 degrees? I came up with children. And the reason why I came up with children was because, of course, those who know me know that I have 2 kids of my own that I actually had. However, I have a daughter by marriage that I raised, who's also currently serving in the military, and I'm so happy she'll be home next week, so that's a good thing. Okay, so because she was in Korea for a year, that was her first duty assignment, so now they're bringing her home, and I'm just so excited about that, especially since she'll only be about 30-45 minutes away from me, and she's already put in her meal request as to what she wants. So anyway, that's out. Shout out to you, Tweet. Can't wait till you get home. So anyway, what I want to bring up this time is children adjusting to the military life. So when I came back from clinical yesterday, I had to sit down with my 10-year-old, and I wanted to talk to him about how does he feel about me having to leave him. And the thing about it is that I don't always leave him for military things. I'm guilty of that. Sometimes I, want to get away for a few days, or I have races that I run in different states or different cities or whatnot. And so it takes me away where I have to actually stay gone the weekend or stay in a hotel and things like that. And I asked him, how does it make him feel? And he says that he didn't really like it, and those are one of the things that I never really, consider when I do things like that. Even with me being gone last week, I had to be gone. I left on Sunday and I came back on Friday, and I came back in time enough to take him to his football practice and then attend his game today, Saturday. So that was good. But my question is, children, how do we assist our children when they're going through separation? You as a parent being separated, and then once you come back, it's like, I'm okay. For me, I'm the mother. So when I leave and come back, my kids are used to doing things a certain way, especially depending on how long I've been gone. And so as long as I had to leave was last year when I left and went to Kuwait for a year, and then I came back in January. And when I came back, my youngest started, kind of acting up in school. He was doing some things that he wouldn't normally do. For those of you who follow me on my Facebook page, you will see that my oldest stole my rental car, and things that he had never done before, amongst a whole bunch of other things that I've had to get calls in the middle of the night regarding, so he's definitely been acting out a little, more so than the youngest. But my 10-year-old says that he doesn't like it when I have to leave as much. So aside from that, I just wanted to see, how do other people handle their children, and when they have to come back home and kind of like fall back into that role of, granted, you're never not a parent, but kind of fall back into, now I'm back, and so we're going to continue to do things the way that we used to do them when I was here before I left. Sometimes, for example, I know with me, when I left to go to Kuwait, there was certain, like a bedtime, for example, my son had. While I was gone, his bedtime was adjusted a little bit, so then when I returned, I wanted him to still have that bedtime, which was a little later than what he had been used to before. And so my mom, who was with him while I was away in Kuwait, was the one who kind of got him on a different bedtime schedule. And so when I came home and he was staying up with me, or just staying up in general, because I thought it was okay for him to stay an hour late, my mother had some issues with that. She was like, I had him on a good time schedule, and so why all of a sudden now you're allow him to stay up later? Because I was used to doing things the way I was used to do them, because I felt like, okay, him staying up another hour is no big deal, because this is what I was used to. When in actuality, he had been used to going to bed an hour later than what I had been, trying to get him to do. So, I just want to talk about the kids. How do we adjust with the kids? How does the kids adjust? And when we do return, what are some of the struggles that we're faced with? Of course, they're glad for us to be back, but is it fair that they get accustomed to us leaving? Is that fair to a kid, that they get accustomed to their kids leaving? And that was one of the things that I actually had a discussion with last week with someone while I was in clinical. Because while I was in clinical, I was talking to one gentleman who was there for 2 weeks because he had back-to-back clinicals. And he said that the hardest part about him being there was being away from his family and his kids. And so for me, it was like, wow, yeah, I don't want to be away from my kids and everything, but that's not the hardest thing I have to deal with right now, because it's sad to say, but I'm kind of used to it. You know what I mean? So is that good? No, of course not. But it's just the lifestyle that we have as soldiers. So I just wanted to know, what are some of the things that you have to deal with when you return from somewhere, and when it comes to your kids. Okay, so if you guys can go ahead and just post some of the experiences you've had with your children when you left and then came home, some of the ways in which they acted out, how did you solve them? How did you get it where you get everybody back on balance, or just get them back where everyone was comfortable, more or less. So if you can share your experiences with me, and so that way we can all get an idea. And again, this is just so that I want to be, instead of reactive as a counselor, I want to be proactive. In other words, I haven't went through everything there is to go through. So because of that, I want to see how other people deal with things. So if I have a service member or a family member that comes to me for counseling, and they've had certain situations, granted, I haven't been through them, but I can have some general ideas of how to better deal with them, especially if it worked well for one person, because it very well may work for someone else. I'm not saying all things will, but just to give someone ideas, because sometimes you can get an idea from someone and still make it your own, but then find out that idea works for you. So whether we want to talk about it on Facebook or we want to talk about it on YouTube, but let's just talk about it. Let's talk about the kids. So I think this is our 30 degree. All right. So I expect to hear from you all and want to comment, and we'll collaborate and we'll go from there. All right. Talk to you later. Peace out.